We are going to go ahead and get started because I do believe in starting on time and ending on time. Welcome to the Accessing the Georgia Milestones, Resources and Strategies for Math Constructed Response and Extended Response. This is the 7th grade session, number 1. I am Sawanda Coffey, the math mentor here at West Georgia RESA. I am glad you were able to join us this afternoon. First, let's start just by talking about the purpose of these webinars. And they are just to provide, new teachers and veteran teachers with another resource that you can, come to and reference back to that will provide an example or some type of prototype for the type of questions your students will be seeing on the Georgia Milestones in the springtime. Due to the time frame of the webinars, we will only be able to review maybe about 1 to 2 questions on average each session. And the series is conducted each month. It may be grouped with just elementary, middle school, and high, or it may be the grade levels being provided. So just check the website to see what's being offered for each month. In each one of the webinars, there will, if it's grouped by middle school, it will be being the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade assessment items will be viewed during that time. Since this is 7th grade, we will just be looking at 7th grade assessment items. Once again, the webinars are offered for grades 3 through 10. So, of course, if you have any other team members, staff members, families, and friends that teach those grade levels, then, just ask them to register and join us. All right. Let's talk about the format of the webinars. They are pretty much set up the same, and that means that we will be looking at the actual assessment item itself, of course. We will also, it'll be related to a standard, and I'll also align the assessment item to the standards for mathematical practice that we should be very familiar with. And along with that, we'll be looking at some scored student work. So that'll kind of give you an idea of the question itself and how students actually answer that and the feedback that they receive when it was provided on the assessment. Let's quickly talk about some norms that we'll see throughout. Of course, you are muted during the presentations, and that is just to reduce the background noise that we may experience where we are. If you have any questions, there is a question area or an area where you can type your questions in. So if you have any, please type those in as we go throughout the webinar. If I'm not able to address those questions, then I'll just consolidate them and answer them and send the answers back via email. And lastly, about the norms is at the end of each of the presentations, there will be a link to the recording uploaded to the West Georgia RESA site. The recording is located under the service tab, and it'll say recorded webinars, and you can just choose the date. So, and also after it has been uploaded, I will send you out the link itself and a copy of the PowerPoint if you want to go and use it for your professional learning in your building. Okay, let's quickly talk about the Georgia Milestones and the 3 item types that your students may see. The selected response, of course, everybody will see that. That's for all content areas. And that's what we know as the multiple choice. Constructed response, that is just being offered for ELA and mathematics. And extended response items, and that's for ELA and mathematics as well. Let's talk about just some vocabulary when we talk about constructed response. Now, with the constructed response, it is basically just a general term for an assessment item that, requires a student to actually have to generate a response as opposed to, choosing an answer choice. Now, with the extended response, those are items that require more elaborate response answers and explanations. It may be that they can come up with multiple ways of addressing that assessment item, or there may be multiple answers to an extended response. Now, examples that we may see or use in our daily classroom when it relates to constructed response or extended response is writing prompts. Of course, we can have writing prompts going on in math as well as ELA, and also those performance tasks that are already embedded inside of the Georgia frameworks. So to kind of give you an idea of what is expected, and if you have not been incorporating those performance tasks, then go back and look at those and see how you can, start integrating those in your lesson plans. Okay, the standard and less essential question that we cover each month, it is related to the assessment item itself. So this month for the 7th grade, the standard is 7RP1, and this is a standard that most people will be getting to very soon in your planning. And it says compute unit rates associated with ratios of fractions, including ratios of length, area, and other quantities measured in like or different units. The lesson essential question is, how do we compute unit rates associated with ratios of fractions? Before we actually get to the assessment item, let's talk about the standards for mathematical practice. Hopefully everyone is familiar with those. If not, this will be one place that you can become familiar with those and how they can be demonstrated inside of your classes. And once again, the standards for mathematical practice that are being presented are related or aligned to the assessment item that we're going to be reviewing for today. Standard 1 is make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. We're going to talk about teacher behaviors, some questions that teachers may ask related to this standard, and also student behaviors that are related to this standard. So some questions that the teacher may ask is, or actually demonstrate, is providing which problems align to the standards. And I'll talk about how it relates to the teacher evaluation system at the end. But if we're providing those which problems to the students, those performance tasks, or if we're able to actually generate some writing prompts for them, then that's another way that they can practice those rich problems. Providing appropriate time for students to engage in productive struggle of problem solving. One thing I will mention to you is that when we talk about the actual problem solving, it's not necessarily the word problems, it's the process that the students actually go through in order to solve the problem. Okay, so, providing them time to actually, gather their thoughts, write down what they think they need, some processes that they think they could use to actually solve that. That's more of the problem solving than the actual word problem itself. Some questions that you may ask your students to address this standard is, how is blank's way of solving the problem like or different from yours? Does your plan make sense? Why or why not? This is, having the opportunity for your students to talk to other students in the room is, a great question to ask. If they can, see how they got to the same answer, either they are doing it in the same way, or they may do it in a different way. It's always good to have those kids to talk to each other about their thought process. What tools or manipulatives might help you? Some teachers are very hesitant about, using manipulatives in the class, even in middle school, but I would definitely say that this would be something, to at least try. There are some students that would benefit in your class from, using manipulatives to actually see that process unfolding in front of them. So just think about that. And if you're not incorporating that, just find, something that you can do that will start, that can be started off easily. All right, some student behaviors related to this standard is reading the problem carefully. We always want them to go through and read the problem to understand what are they being asked and what information they already have. A second student behavior is checking answers and making sure solutions are reasonable and make sense. always, encourage the student to, once they have, come up to an answer, just ask them to go back in and verify that it actually makes sense. And discussing the meaning of the problem with classmates. Once again, this is another area where we can allow our students to become more accountable for what they're learning, or just having them to actually explain themselves to others. It helps with their knowledge. Okay, the next standard that's been addressed in the assessment item for today is standard 2. It says reason abstractly and quantitatively. And some teacher behaviors is providing a variety of problems in different contexts that allow to arrive at a solution in different ways. Another one is using thinking aloud strategies as they model problem solving. That means as the teacher, it is a good behavior to actually let the students know how you would attack the problem. So when we talk about think aloud, just give them a verbal description of what you're thinking of how you would solve it. And of course, you can also provide that in writing on your boards for the students to see. Some teacher questions: what does the number blank represent in the problem? Can you make a chart, a table, or a graph that is, to help you understand what the problem is asking, or to help you actually come up with a solution? Student behaviors that we would like to see in the class is taking quantities out of context to work with them, and that is decontextualizing, and putting the quantities back in the context to see if they make sense. And that's called contextualizing. If a student is able to read a word problem and they have to understand each piece in the problem, then of course that would be your contextualizing. All right, standard 4 is modeled with mathematics. Some teacher behaviors is providing opportunities for students to solve problems in real life context. I think this should be a daily behavior as teachers that we should be providing to our students. The more they see those types of problems, I think the more they become comfortable when you actually present them with word problems or performance tasks. So another behavior would be identifying problem-solving contexts connected to student interests. There are students that are interested in multiple things in our classes. Some students may be interested in history. Some students may be interested in sports. Just bringing those different ideas, those different contexts into the classes to help the students understand the content that you are currently teaching. Teacher questioning related to standard 4. Can you write a number sentence to describe this situation? That's something that we're going to see today in the assessment item. Another one is, what connections do you see? If your students are able to, tell you that I remember this concept being related to something you may have covered in a previous unit, or even maybe in a previous grade level, then they have some type of knowledge about what's going on. And of course, some student behaviors that we would like to have the students demonstrate is making connections between different mathematical representations, whether it's concrete, algebraic, numerical. But we definitely want, to see them make those connections and see how deep their knowledge is about the content that's being taught. And the last standard for mathematical practice related to today's assessment item is attend to precision. And teacher behaviors is explicitly teaching mathematics vocabulary. I'm a very big advocate for, teaching mathematics vocabulary without it being immersed in the content. So I when I was in the classroom, I love to just have a segment of my class period just designated to vocabulary instruction. And normally I would place it right behind my bell work, do now, or whatever you may call the beginning work when the students come in. But it's definitely important to teach that mathematics vocabulary. And then, of course, insisting on accurate use of the academic language from the students. and using complete sentences. Now, I will say that in order to be successful in completing the especially the extended response items, the students must be accustomed to writing in complete sentences. In math, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but 4 to 5 sentences, 3 times a week or so, then they become comfortable with that procedure. So making sure that we incorporate that. Some teacher questioning is, what does the word blank mean? Explain what you did to solve the problem. And we see it again with the student behaviors, communicating precisely using clear language and concrete mathematics vocabulary. And then deciding on or when to estimate or give an exact answer. And that is going to be an important one that we are going to see in the assessment item in just a second. But back to the TEKS numbers that you see in red, what the standards of mathematical practice, they have been aligned to the TAP standard that we are all being evaluated on. Some of us been on it for 2 or 3 years, and some teachers are just being introduced to it. But how you can use these numbers is if you go and reference the fact sheets that are located on the Georgia DOE site. How you read this would be standard number 1, TAP standard number 1, and on the fact sheet they list some performance indicators, and that may be bulleted with so many. So this may be the 5th one that explicitly teacher mathematics vocabulary is related to. So to get a deeper idea of how it relates, just visit the fact sheet. Okay, here's the assessment item for this month for 7th grade. It says a pine tree measured 40.5 feet tall. Over the next 7.5 years, it grew to a height of 57 feet. During the 7.5 years, what was the average yearly growth rate of the height of the tree? And so the student had to show their work, and then they had to provide their answer. And you see they already provide the units for the student, so we know the answer has to be expressed in feet per year. Now, each month, I will be highlighting a resource of the month. And this month, I am highlighting samples from Engage New York. This is a recommended state assessment resource that the Georgia DOE thinks, okay, well, if you go there, you can actually find some good, rich questions for you to use in your classes. So this is, once again, from Engage New York. As we go through this question, what I would like for you all to do is, of course, see if you can answer the question. Keep in mind the standards for mathematical practice that we just discussed. One thing I did not emphasize is that standard number 1 and standard number 6 should be evident in every single lesson that you do in your classroom. Once again, standard number 1 and standard number 6 should be evident in your lessons every day. Okay, let's look at some strategies to address the problem. This is not the actual problem solving framework. This is something that I gathered from a training that I did a couple of months ago that Robert Kaplinski conducted. So I thought it was a good framework to use because it can be used in all different aspects in our classes, whether it is whole group, small group, individual work. You can use it on skill work and the performance task. So the first question for the framework would be, what problem are you trying to figure out? Of course, this is, what are they asking us to do? What guesses do you have? This is one of those ones where we encourage the dialogue between the students in the room. We just want them to provide guesses to us. Whether they are right or wrong, it does not matter. So in order to bring this one out in your class and to ensure that each student, feels like their answer is worthy, is you would choose the first guess that a student provides. And what you would do is you would poll the rest of the class to see, okay, well, what students have a answer that is lower than the answer that was initially given. So say if the first number given was 10 And so you gather all the answers, and the lowest number ends up being 4. What you would do after then is you would do the same thing for students that may have an answer that is greater than 10. So you continue to do that until you have all the students have participated, and the largest answer comes up to be 25. So now you can say to your class, okay, class, we know that our answer is going to be between 4 and 25. And what you have created is just an environment where all students feel that their answer is worthy at this point. There's no right or wrong. The next is, what do you already know from the problem? This is explicitly what is being given to you in the problem. The students are able to pick that out, write that down, and, to use it for later when they're actually answering. The next is, what do you need to know to solve the problem? Once again, that comes back to those standards for mathematical practice. If a student is able to, tell you what they need to help them solve the problem, then they have an idea of what is being asked. The next is, what should the title of this problem or this lesson be? At this point in this problem solving framework, this is just to bring the student back to the focus of the lesson, which normally the title would be something related to the question that's being asked in the assessment item. Provided your work while working on the problem, there should be a section, whether it's in the student's notebook or just an area at this time where they are allowed to just jot down everything that they know, everything they need to know, and actually start trying to work the problem out and come up with an actual reasonable answer. And lastly is, what is your conclusion? How did you reach that conclusion? With this last bulleted item, it is designed, to have the students to respond using complete sentences. An excellent way to actually, get into the students doing this is to actually provide them with the question each day where they're encouraged to write their answers in complete sentences. And then once they've done that, then actually move on to actually answering. All right, since I am highlighting a resource from Engage New York, they have a 2-point holistic rubric that they use. And if a student scores 2 points out of 2 points, then that indicates that the response is complete. They use mathematically sound procedures, demonstrates a thorough understanding of the mathematic concepts that are, inside of that assessment item. If a student scores a 1, then that response, correctly addresses only some elements of the task. It may contain an incorrect solution, but applies a mathematically appropriate process. And we're going to see that in some of our feedback for the student as well. And it may contain correct solution, but required work is incomplete. And lastly, if a student scores 0 points out of 2, then it's considered, the response is incorrect or irrelevant, incoherent. The student pretty much does not provide a deep demonstration that they know what the mathematical concepts are in the task. And we're talking about a holistic picture when we're looking at these, when we actually score the assessment items. Okay, scored student work number 1. Let's look at the problem again and then look at how this student answered this problem. A pine tree measured 40.5 feet tall. Over the next 7.5 years, it grew to a height of 57 feet. And during the 7.5 years, what was the average yearly growth rate of the height of the tree? And this student actually set up a algebraic equation with 40.5 plus 7.5 R equals 57. Subtracted 40.5 from both sides and was left with 7.5 R is equal to 16.5, and then divided both sides by 7.5 and comes up with 2.2. Now the feedback that was provided to the student, let's look at that. The response is correct and demonstrates a thorough understanding of the mathematical concepts and procedures embodied in the task. Of course, they set up an equation to find the rate of growth, which was R. They labeled as R. the values given in the prompt are converted into their decimal equivalents, and R is calculated equivalently. So this is what an overall great understanding from a student. And there are multiple ways that a student could have come up with that same answer. This student scored 1 out of 2 points. So let's see what or how they came up with their answer of 2.26 repeating. They're saying that in 2005, you had 40 and a half, because that's feet. And then they try to, I guess, visualize, okay, in 7.5 years, that 40 and a half foot tree would be growing to 17 feet. So in 2012 and a half, I guess they would say, or mid-year through 2012, it should be 57 feet. The response is partially correct and contains an incorrect solution, but applies a mathematically appropriate process. The number of feet the tree grew in 7.5 years is incorrectly determined to be 17 feet. This incorrect height is then correctly divided by the number of years. So we can see some things are good, some things are bad, but overall did not come up with just the 2.2 as it should have been. Because it should have just came up, instead of 17 feet, it should have been just 16.5 feet. And just think about how you could have used, or you can actually use this in your lessons, because this should be coming up for some people very soon if you haven't gotten to it already. And then this student scored a 0 out of 2 points. What this student did was pretty much just added up all of the numbers that were in the problem, and then in the process still came up with an incorrect answer, because they have 40.5, 7.5, but then 57, and that student may have interpreted that'd be 5.7. It still came up with incorrect answer. Okay, and one more thing before we end the webinar is feedback. It is very important that we provide our students with written or verbal and verbal feedback, and that feedback must be given frequently. I know we are in the process of our TKES evaluations, so we know how we like to be evaluated as well as provided with feedback, so we will know how we can get better. So the student deserves the same right to have that feedback, to know how can they get closer to mastering the standard. Feedback must be provided to tell the student their next steps in moving towards mastering the standard. I think I just kind of said that. Just giving them a note of what is it that you need to do to move to the next step of getting closer to mastering that standard. And lastly, use the language of the standards when providing feedback. So we should constantly be aware of what standards we are covering. And so when you're providing that feedback to the students, use the actual language of the standard, so the students are knowing exactly what are we, what is our goal, what are we aiming to do, what do we want our end result to be. So making sure that you use that language so you can always be knowledgeable and the kids can know what to do next. Okay. I always love to start on time and end on time. And once again, with the references, today's assessment item was highlighted from Engage New York. There will be more resources coming each month. What I like to do is just introduce one resource at a time to allow the teachers time to actually go and review the resource, become familiar with it, and actually implement the questions into their classes. Because right now I know everyone may be overwhelmed, but a little bit at a time, and then by the end of the year you'll have an extra amount of resources in your toolbox. Now, if there are any questions at this time, At the end, once again, I will be sending out the recording as well as the PowerPoint for anyone to use. Let me not forget, I did not say this in the beginning, is the last website, the archive webinars. What we are providing each month is not in lieu of what the DOE has available for every teacher. This is just another resource. So the archive webinars that the DOE has presented is section for elementary, middle school, and high school, and they are also providing example assessment items, and they are using a different rubric, but I will bring that in to some of the future webinars. So it is a little bit earlier, so if there are no questions, and I don't think I see any, I really do appreciate you joining me today, and I want you all to have a wonderful, magnificent Monday.